So here's my next project. Somebody brought me this piece here and asked me if I would be willing to put some succulents in it. I think it's a very interesting piece. And so today I went and acquired some tools. I got a rotary tool and a bunch of different bits, and I'm planning on carving it out, but this is the initiatory state of the piece. I've also signed somebody else on to help me to work on it. Yeah.
Good morning. Jeff from Cushman Permaculture here. Today I am working on a sculpture. It's actually a pot. One of my coworkers brought this in the other day to show me and asked me if I would put some succulents into it, and so I started messing around with it, and the shape of it's pretty curious. If you can catch a right angle here, you'll see that it looks like a hand. So I started working with it this morning. I'm gonna get a little closer here, and it's pretty cool. Anyway, I thought I'd give you a window to view me messing around for fun and pleasure, and watch me try not to mess this thing up.
Every day convince myself of everything I can and can't believe. Abused, confused. Every day you feel every climb, just stare out into space and wonder why. Afraid, deranged. Hold on to your promise, you can use it for a crutch. Stand by while all your dreams get trampled in the dust. Leave now before your freight machines begin to rust. Last chance farewell among us. Every day you get a little bit older and everything gets hard, you wonder why. Afraid, deranged. Every day you feel every climb, and in the shop and show on the parade. Abused, confused. Hold on to your promise, you can use it for a crutch. Stand by while all your dreams get trampled in the dust. Leave now before your freight machines begin to rust. Last chance farewell among us. Every day convince myself of everything I can and can't believe. Afraid, deranged. Hold on to your promise, you can use it for a crutch. Stand by while all your dreams get trampled in the dust. Leave now before your sweat machines begin to rust. Last chance
still think I want to bring that down a little bit more right here. That's pretty good though. That connecting one is not bad. And that's starting to shape up. It needs to be reduced in size. That's closer to it. So I got to trim off a little bit off of here, right in this joint, right there. And then cut back around here a little bit further. Now, I always find the geometries of nature to be very fascinating. And I find myself having this conversation with my friends when they're available, but usually ends up turning into hours of, you know, me kind of rambling. But I find it really, really fascinating that you could go out into, you know, your backyard in the woods and be walking by something and see something like this. I mean, it looks like a hand, the shape of it. And think about how this piece probably grew. Now, it's a piece of cypress, and what I was told is that it was sourced from Florida. And he saw, well, the man saw this, and then he took his saw and he cut this piece off and saved it because it looked like that. But I think it's strange that it's very easy to see shapes like a hand or a face on a tree. And my thing, and this may be a little bit out there, in fact I think it is kind of out there, is that energy itself has a formula or a blueprint on it, and when it comes in contact with its medium, which would be the physical matter, that it gathers shape from that dimensional space where information, abstract information, comes from. And you know, nature has the most wonderful way of pulling down abstract information from light, and the formulas or the blueprints, and then imposing the energy of the environment. You'll have things shift and look like the dominant energy, you know. So in my mind, on a higher dimensional plane of existence, that this shape, the energy that it took to create this geometry had been in contact with another being that had a hand, perhaps, and then that got imprinted onto a tree. And of course, you know, I mean, it's just a tree in the most simple of terms, but and it will always be a tree until I come along and I look at it and I go, whoa, that looks like a, and somehow there's a communication happening between us and nature when we look at things like this. And this is the inspiration for all kinds of creative works. You walk, well, I do it all the time. I'm building a machine, and I want to create a system that integrates two separate systems, two separate grows, one that produces oxygen and one that produces CO2, and create a circle. And then somebody says, well, that reminds me of a forest floor. And I'm like, well, how's that? Well, because these things, they grow in tandem in nature. They support each other, and they supply each other with the necessary items to feed each other. And you know, the ecosystem works like this, where there isn't one thing in the ecosystem that isn't providing some kind of service to the greater thing. Whether you perceive it to be negative or positive, that really matters not to the system itself, because it works. So in total, it's a functional thing. You try to pull one thing out or add one thing in, and then you'll see a fluctuation in the pattern of the system until it's integrated or it's expelled from it. You know, it's brought in and the life cycle continues. It disrupts other things in that cycle, and other things, you know, continue, they don't continue. But all that information that provides these things, and it provides the growth, comes from, essentially from light. They grow in the dark. To begin with, most things start in the dark. And then they have light and they receive that energy, and bang, you have a weird looking hand in the Just basement. But integrated systems. And then we get to be the medium for information and actual straightforward manipulation, purposely or not. You know how we step on the ground compresses the soil, and that changes the composition of it just by adding the extra weight and compaction. And then, see, didn't take long to get lost. Not lost, just admiring. Oh, here's one for you. I've been talking about this for the last couple weeks because it kind of really put some spring in my step. So I was with my family, and my wife and my son had gone to get their haircut, and my daughter and I were sitting in the car waiting, and for whatever reason I had this inspiration to look up a video to see people shattering glass with their voices, and I was just floored by the idea. I'm like, that's really neat. I wonder how that works. And so I found this video of this man. He was attempting to shatter glass with his voice the first time, and you'd set the intention, and he could cite why scientifically it was possible. And so, you know, he would do an hour a day where he would sit with his glass, and basically what you want to do is you want to match the resonant frequency of the material object. It does require a specific type of glass. I mean, probably if you could do higher amplitudes of energy or frequency and vibration tone, you could probably break just about anything, and this is kind of where I'm going with this. Anyway, so he, for like an hour every day, he would come home and he would go he'd flick the crystal glass and go, oh, or whatever the tone was. And part of what he was told was that you could take and put a straw inside of the crystal glass, and once you got close to holding the resonant note, that straw would shake around. And so he went for like 8 or 9 days, I think, before the straw ever started to shake. But on like the 9th day, he was doing it and the straw was shaking around. He got pretty excited and he was like, wow, you know, that's cool. And then he went back to it, and a couple days later, he'd actually managed to hit the right resonant tone with the right amplitude of power, and pop, the glass busted. And then, you know, he was excited. He was walking around showing his friends how he could break the glass, and he was sitting at the dinner table. One of his videos, he was sitting at the dinner table with his wife eating dinner, and he had a glass and he held it up and he flicked it and he busted it. Like within 10 seconds he had matched the resonant frequency, and you know, he kept on doing it until it was almost instantaneous. And then he gave the scientific reasons why, and this is what kind of blows me away. So basically, when you project a frequency or a tone in a frequency that matches another object's frequency, it disrupts the material structure of the thing. When you match the resonant tone, it shakes the molecules of oxygen around the more solid materials, causing it to vibrate on the inside layer of it, essentially, or you know, the inner parts of it. And when you do that, it creates material distortion, and then as a result, the structure can be broken apart with just sound. And I went, what? So you're telling me that he sent a sound into a molecule, the molecule touching other molecules, or within you know, a certain distance, they began to shake. And then all those molecules are shaking around the glass, and then suddenly it goes pop. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And one of the machines I've been building, I started working on it because I was trying to figure out what the proper frequency was, or proper tone and frequency and amplitude was for helping to enhance plant growth. And this is kind of a curious thing, that there's not more information on this thing. The closest thing to it is what would be called a Rife machine, which was meant to work in the same way that our technology, and here we are again, another example of weirdness, of noise cancellation on headphones, right? It works just like this. So you have one frequency or one tone that's being cyclically repeated, frequency that matches another one's, and then when they come into contact with each other, they nullify or neutralize each other. Kind of like we have two waves that come at each other at the same angle, and they run up to each other, and then the wave just kind of disappears. But in noise canceling technology, it's the same principle, except for you're not working with water in this instance, you're working with sound. And so when you have noise canceling headphones, what it does is that it is hearing the frequencies that are being created outside of your ear, and then it matches synthetically that frequency, and as a result, that wave that you would have been hearing is canceled, so you don't hear it. All right, now they're really weird, but true as far as I know, but works off that principle where you have two waves that are coming at each other, two tones and frequencies, and we're projecting in wave. Then you have a nullification. Well, the Rife machine is essentially the same thing, except for we're talking about breaking cellular structure. We're talking about popping apart molecules or microorganisms, which is composite molecules, like cancer. That's what the machine was initially created for, was to break down disease. And basically what this man was doing, it was back in the 50s or the 40s, I believe, he had figured out what the resonant frequency of cancer and of other diseases, and he had devised a device that could project those frequencies into the cells. And then what they were witnessing was the breakdown of the structure of the cells, meaning just like that glass that gets shaken, the resonant tones of it were shaking those cells and breaking them back apart. And there's a lot more to it, of course. There's, the electrical effects and things like material compositions, but essentially breaking material with your voice is possible. Stopping sound from happening through the process of projecting light is not just possible, but that's how the technology works. So then I came a little bit further on, and I'll come back to this again. I still haven't found the right frequency or the tone and frequency to put onto plants to enhance growth, but that's on the way. That's why I started Cushman Permaculture, in part, was to be able to grow more food, have it a more ready, available supply for people, so that we could share food, we could have direct contact with our food sources, and we could invest into not just our future, but our kids' futures, so that they could have readily available fresh produce and whatever else we could potentially create, as a community. But the last one that I picked up, and this one I think is the coolest one, was that you've heard the idea that a bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly based on its mass of its body versus the mass of its wings, or the structure of its wings, or the size. There we go, the size of its wings. And everybody said this for a long time. Well, they shouldn't be able to fly. Well, what I read recently was that these bumblebees have little tiny cavities in the back by their wings, and the cavities, they're cavities. They utilize the principle of, I believe it's cavitation, to not fly, but to levitate, to disrupt gravity. So what I read was that when the bees beat their wing, they beat their wings at a very specific frequency, times per second, and that vibration from their wings and the tone of it goes back into the cavities in their back, and that creates a resonant wave field, and the wave field ends up displacing the gravity, so they're not so much flying, but they're levitating. And I went, well, that's really strange, and it sounds not just plausible, it would make sense. That's how they can fly, even though their body to wing ratios seem displaced or disjointed. And that they keep on following the line here, where nature, again, has its own built-in geometries that create things that are excellent. I mean, honey has a long shelf life when it's packed inside of its hexagonal shaped honeycombs. And then the bee's wings, now we're testing the potential of the resonant tone and frequency of bees in a colony to treat PTSD, because this frequency is so effective for preserving things and for creating things, and bees they're a superior insect when it comes to these kind of things. Very obvious by the product they make that has brought us so much benefit. And there are methods of preservation which are built into the geometry, which is just light being splashed onto the nature itself, where the blueprints are coming from, as it were. God, he built those things into the system, and I love that. I mean, I'm going to keep on wondering about this for a while, but I think about how many times I've been blessed with another opportunity to do a thing like this, to even speak on it, something so wonderful, and to kind of feel like life has so much more depth and value at this point for me than it ever has. And I've done plenty of good things in my life. I love being a father, and I love to be, person of the community. I love animals. I love nature. You can put me out in the sticks anytime, I'm okay. But I love creativity, and I think for me personally, if you were to attribute something to God that was amazing, was the creative ability of humans, and basically just passed on all these wonderful things that are waiting to be unearthed, as it were, for us to play with and to get a better look at ourselves. And the craziest part about that is the fact that every time, it's like reading a book. Every time you go back and read that same book, whatever book it is, it'll present to you something new. And that's because as we go through time, or we go through our lives, we get new experiences that shift our emotions and shift our worldviews and our perspectives. So when we go back and read the book, it relates differently to us. Not that the words change, but that is the nature of life. And my slogan is perspective is king. That you could take a situation for one person that would be just about as close to heaven as could be for them, and then you could take another person and put them in the same exact situation. It would be complete and total hell. Perspective is king. And trust me when I say this, I know for me, and you can do whatever you want with it, I know for me that I've created both heaven and hell every step of the way. So I'm going to embrace God's gift, and I'm going to use my creativity to serve the community and share what I got. And today it just so happens to be that we're making a sculpture to let somebody else's creative monster out and see what we can do.
I got my way of life, then I won't back down or apologize for things that cannot change. Guess I gotta do things my own way, and I don't give a damn if you got a problem.
pretty good. A little more here. Edge that out a little bit more. That's good though. Thickens around the soffle on the sides. Guess I need to kind of take stock and recalculate my mess here. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. I love you. Have a good day. Till next time.